The world is full of horror. It should come as no surprise then that much of our planet's mysteries lie in the murky depths of our seas and oceans. The deeper down the ocean we go, the more horrifying the creatures residing there, slithering and thriving in total secluded darkness, creatures that seem alien and unnatural, but are just more of our planet's glorious creations taken straight out of a novel of the weird and wonderful. A multitude of ominous, if not straight-up terrifying discoveries have been made on the pristine shores of our beloved beaches. A sunny day out with the family could result in more than you bargained for. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 mysterious discoveries made on beaches. Man finds brain while walking along a beach in Wisconsin. Walks on the beach are supposed to be pleasant, serene, and in many cases romantic. This was not the case for one unlucky man in Wisconsin, who instead of finding gorgeous seashells full of pearls or taking a lover's walk with a significant other, found something horrid, a brain. James Jimmy Sender was minding his own business when all of a sudden he came across an entire brain wrapped up in tin foil, sitting there on Lake Michigan Beach at Samuel Myers Park near the east of Rochester. To call this happening strange or horrific would not even be cutting it close to the emotions James Sender must have felt at the time he made this awful discovery. For most people, the idea of coming across a lifeless body or a part of a body is a pure nightmare, and it is surely the case here. The situation sounds something like a crime thriller, but as they say, truth is always stranger than fiction. Apparently, based on his interview with CBS 58 TV, James Sender was taking a casual stroll down the beach, hoping to find sea glass to add to his collection, which he used for his personal artistic passion projects, when, out of nowhere, he spotted a mysterious bag poking out in the sand. He found an oddly shaped tinfoil package adorned with flowers, held together with a rubber band with what looked like Mandarin symbols printed on it. Sender opened it, his fascination getting the better of him, and inside was a brain. He said the following: "I don't really know how to explain it, it didn't register. I was like, what is this? I came across this package wrapped in aluminium foil, and around it, it had a pink rubber band, and it looked like a chicken breast. Kind of. It took a little bit for it to really register. It was a brain." After the realization processed in his mind, Mr. Sender rushed to find city employees who worked at Michigan Park to show them what he found, not knowing who else to go to. He hoped, as anyone else would, that he was wrong and that there was another, better explanation for what he found. But there was not. Indeed, it was a brain. But despite the horror of the situation, he was revealed to have been the one to find it, and not an innocent child, proclaiming how there were many families in the area. After confirming with the employees that it was a brain, Sender rushed to inform the police of his finding, who took the brain and had it medically examined. Fortunately, revealing the brain was not of human origin, though it is not too uncommon for body parts to wash up on shores. In the past decade alone, about 15 lone feet were discovered inside boots or trainers on the beaches of Washington. The origin of the brain is entirely unknown. But who would take a brain wrapped in foil to the beach? Radioactive material found on Suffolk beaches, still a mystery at present. A mysterious material has been discovered on multiple Suffolk beaches, the most recent one of which being the beach near Sizewell. Scientists have been monitoring the beaches ever since. Months ago, officials of the Environment Agency publicly addressed they found traces of radioactive substances on these beaches of unknown origin. Small amounts of radioactive isotopes, it is hardly good news. The first traces were found at Oldburg Beach, whilst another element was found in Southwold. Officials responsible for public safety have issued warnings that these discoveries, though concerning, were not in large quantities and pose no environmental issue on the natural environment, nor do they host any potential health risks for the public. Stuart Parr, a member of the Environment Agency, stated that it was a very small amount of, and it could be to do with tide patterns when pressed by the SSG or Sizewell stakeholder group about the cesium found. Cesium is a metal most commonly used for medical purposes such as hydrology and industrial gauges, but is classified as toxic, if only slightly. The Environment Agency carried out various investigations on the places the cesium was found but stressed that it is not that uncommon of a material to find. Mr. Parr stated that they had a thorough investigation of Oldberg Beach and discovered the element strontium-90 produced by nuclear fission. They have since been monitoring all 5 beaches in the area for any more radioactive substances. Unfortunately, the sample analysis results are not available as of yet, primarily due to the fact that analyzing strontium-90 is a tedious process that can take several weeks, if not months, to properly dissect. Strontium-90 is a heavily complicated substance and requires an equally complicated type of analysis performed in a special laboratory. A sample of the cesium from Oldberg Beach was sent to 2 other laboratories for analysis as well. Different laboratories may have alternative conditions which might affect the results, so it is crucial for samples to be analyzed in at least 2 different labs. Oil tanker washes up on Liberia Beach with no crew or lifeboats. In Liberia, West Africa, an oil tanker by the name of Tamaya, washed up on shore abandoned and without a surviving crew member in sight. The officials of Liberia have launched an investigation into the matter, and most importantly, what happened to the tanker's crew and if any of them managed to make it out alive. The Liberian Bureau of Immigration looked at the ship mere days after its discovery by the people living near the beach. The tanker is 210 feet or 64 meters high, and its last reported position was near Senegal on the 21st of April 2016. The ship was supposed to head to the Senegalese port, Dhaka, according to the marine traffic. Despite carrying out an investigation, the maritime Liberian authorities refused to comment on the situation. Though a source from the authorities in the Liberian Daily Observer stated, "Our best bet is that the vessel's owner might have gone broke and had no money to pay crew members, and the crew abandoned the ship." A theory arose in the local area that modern pirates hijacked the ship and forced the crew off it, stealing some of its contents. In West Africa, piracy occurs around the south of Liberia and in the waters of Nigeria and Ghana. It is a relatively common occurrence. Piracy and maritime kidnappings are a growing issue even now in 2021. Many believe that the theorized pirates took the lives of the people on Timia 1 or alternatively kidnapped them and took them for ransom. Very often during these pirate attacks, the criminals take bystanders hostage. Though as of now there is no evidence to suggest something like this occurred, but 5 years later the fates of the crew are still unknown. Still, it is an interesting theory to consider, especially with the high rates of piracy happening on the Western African seas. Another more grounded theory posed was that there was a fire on the deck, which made the crew flee with the lifeboats. Mere days after washing up, the ship was promptly looted by locals and vandalists, and the local authorities have put measures in place to keep the civilians away. The name Tamaya refers to a Shinto altar used for worshipping the dead, specifically ancestors. Another translation would be Cornice of the Ghosts. An oil tanker mysteriously washes up on the shores of a country named after supernatural worship without a living soul to be seen. Could something unimaginable have happened to Tamaya 1's crew? Something far more paranormal than we could fathom. We are not privy to know what became of the crew and are left only to speculate on their whereabouts or if they even survived whatever may have happened to them. The world is untold from the past, present, and future. Loss of lives into the oceans, brains covered in tinfoil, the disappearance of an entire crew without a single trace, theories of spirits haunting vessels all sound like plots to disturbing films but are a bitter reminder of the world in which we live. The next time you go to the beach, be wary of what you may find. But what do you make of these 3 chilling finds? Historians studying the long-distant past must piece together clues about past civilization from artifacts, artwork, and what documents and journals they can find from that period. However, luckily for historians studying the more recent past, photographs exist to capture quite literally the goings-on of history. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 instances where the ape man of the Amazon. In 2012, a series of photographs circulated throughout the internet and became an instant viral mystery. These photos showcased an ape man that was discovered in the Brazilian jungle. In the 1930s, A Dutch magazine featured these pictures and described the man as the missing link. It gained a little attention when it was published in 1937, but reached the entire world when it resurfaced in 2012. Millions of people saw the pictures on Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit and began coming up with their own theories and speculations. Online users were intent on figuring out the mystery and proving it to be a hoax. Some were eager to believe it to be true, while others argued it was merely prosthetics and makeup that changed the man's face. The man in question was bent over as if he were walking like a monkey and had ape-like lips and a deep-set brow. His nose and ears were larger than most people, and in every photo he held his hands in fists, closing the knuckles. Scientists, historians, and online observers were quick to critique the pictures and point out obvious flaws in the hoax. Although the magazine claimed the man was a wild creature caught in the Amazonian jungle and was closely related to apes, he was surprisingly hairless. His face was clean-shaven and his hair neatly cut. Many also noted how poorly the prosthetics and makeup were applied to his face. You can see a faith line from the nose to the chin that connects the pieces and holds them in place. Critics claimed that his hair lay over his forehead to cover the prosthetics and blend in the makeup. Some claim that the most likely explanation for these photos is that the man was born with congenital disabilities and made to wear the prosthetics. Individuals born with defects were treated as outcasts and freaks during this period, so whoever planned these pictures probably exploited him to pretend to be an ape man. While most dismissed this picture as a fake, many people believe in ape-like creatures that you can only find in remote and hidden areas. Sasquatch in North America and the Yeti in the Himalayas have garnered attention and followers for decades, prompting many to explore the wilderness searching for them. There is even a mythic ape-like beast that supposedly lives in the remote woods of Australia. The Aboriginals call it the Yowie and claim it reaches 5 feet in height. There will always be hope for finding the missing link in human evolution. And since there are so many areas of the world still unexplored, there will always be people searching for it. Radium Girl's luminous watches in the early 1900s glow-in-the-dark accessories became immensely popular and everyone wanted them. Watches were an especially prized item because their paint didn't need changing and always shined as if they were magic. The watches first began being mass-produced in New Jersey factories in 1916, who first hired nearly 70 women to paint them delicately. Painting in the factory was well paid and many women were eager to work. As the industry grew, factories sprung up all over the United States and employed thousands of women. None of them were aware that their work involved using and ingesting a dangerous radioactive element, radium. The women needed a sharp and finely pointed paintbrush to draw on the dials accurately since the watches were so small. The factory owners and managers instructed the workers to keep their brushes pointed by wetting them with their mouths. They lied to the women, telling them that the paint was safe to ingest and that they had nothing to worry about. The workers also had to contend with the radioactive dust that flew up when they mixed the paint, covering their hair and clothes in shimmer. The women loved it because of the shine, not realizing they were breathing in radium. In 1898, Marie Curie and her husband discovered radium and dramatically improved cancer treatments with it. People believed it was a healthy vitamin that would provide you with energy and cure all ailments. They began adding it to toothpaste, food, drinks, and cosmetics, claiming it was a powerful health tonic. At the time, everyone assumed that it was completely harmless to take. They understood that the radioactivity released energy, but were oblivious to any negative side effects could cause. They believed that adding energy to the body was beneficial and necessary, which is far from the truth. Radium is incredibly dangerous when ingested because the body mistakes it for calcium. Repeatedly ingesting radium leads to bone cancers within just a few years. The watches grew in popularity until the 1920s when scientists and researchers began to understand radioactivity truly. The Radium Girls, however, were completely unaware of their poisoning because symptoms did not immediately develop. They all believed they were in healthy conditions because the radioactivity appeared to provide energy and stimulate the red blood cells. It only took a few years until the women began to feel the effects of their radium poisoning. In the early 1920s, they started to suffer from toothaches and jaw pain. Molly Magyar was the first radium girl to pass away in 1922 from radium jaw, although the reason for her loss of life was incorrectly written as syphilis. Radium jaw was the most prevalent result of radioactivity. The bones became so weak and brittle that the jaws were literally withering away and could simply be lifted off the face. There is no exact number of how many women lost their lives from working in the factories, as some symptoms developed slowly throughout their lives. Experts estimate the numbers reached the thousands. In 1927, Grace Fryer sued her factory with 4 others and won the case. The government eventually banned the lip-pointing practice and factories were required to provide protective gear. Multiple women sued radium companies over the years, helping create many of our current labor laws and even allowing scientists to examine them to study radioactivity. Nearly everything that we understand about radiation is because of radiation. Enos, the first primate to orbit the Earth. On November 29, 1961, Enos launched into space to become the first primate to achieve Earth orbit in 1 hour and 28.5 minutes. He was the second chimpanzee that NASA used for space research, but received much more intensive training than his predecessor, Ham. He completed over 1,250 hours of training, including aircraft flights, weightlessness, and psychomotor instructions. He trained for over a year before he was suddenly chosen for NASA's Project Mercury flight. Previous Mercury flights were crewless and launched with a simulator. NASA planned to use Enos's flight as a test before launching American astronauts into orbit. Enos was on board Mercury 5 for 2 orbits around Earth. Despite being scheduled to conduct 3, there were malfunctions in the capsule that prevented the last orbit. Enos was trained using avoidance conditioning where he would receive an electric shock to his feet whenever he failed to complete a simple task. The trainers used oddity problems. Enos was presented with 3 shapes and needed to pick out which shape did not match the others. He would then press the lever associated with that shape. If he got it wrong, he was shocked. During his flight, Enos had to work through multiple oddity problems. While his first test was fine, the lever in the center malfunctioned during the next tests. The test kept showing him the same problem repeatedly, and he was unable to get it right because the correct answer needed the broken center lever. As he orbited the Earth, he was shocked 33 times in a row because of the malfunction. He received 35 total shocks in the second test, before it moved on to other tasks. Unfortunately, after a while, Enos was once again forced to go through the oddity problems with a malfunctioning lever. In this session, he was shocked 41 times. NASA scientists were surprised that his overall performance and behavior were not affected by so many electrical shocks and that he could continue with his tasks. NASA ended his flight early and sent him back to Earth. However, he did not land where he was supposed to. It took over 3 hours until the USS Storms reached him. By that time, Enos had already removed his psychological sensors and urinary catheter and broke through the protective belly panel. Enos passed away a year later, on November 4, 1962, from dysentery caused by shigellosis, which is an illness when the immune system is suppressed. Researchers observed him for months before he passed away and reported that there were no space-related symptoms to cause it. Was then dissected and extensively studied just like the first primate. Unlike Ham, though, his remains are nowhere to be found. Supposedly, his remains were sent to the Smithsonian Institute after his post-mortem examination. Perhaps we should thank them for their "What do you make of these 3 incredible historical photographs?" Because the ocean is so constant and unchanging, sometimes we can forget the enormity of the unexplored area below the crashing waves. For centuries, humans have attempted to dive below the surface in order to gain a greater understanding of what is hidden from sight, and these discoveries are often astonishing. While generally they consist of strange new species of fish or unbelievable natural formations, occasionally humans find things that have been lost by other humans under the sea, sometimes even for centuries. It is these discoveries, markers of once powerful civilizations that have since sunk below the waves and been forgotten under the sea, that are perhaps the most exciting. So today, We will be looking at 3 underwater discoveries and what amazing things have been pulled from the depths of the sea. Antikythera bronze statue arm, one of the best sources of historical flotsam and jetsam, remains ancient shipwrecks, and the discovery of a well-preserved shipwreck can give many valuable clues to historians studying the past, not to mention a multitude of priceless objects. Sometimes shipwrecks are so bountiful when they are discovered that they become rather famous. As is the case with a site near the Greek, this shipwreck had already gained notoriety as the location of countless interesting artifacts, including a cryptic astronomical computer and calculator that baffled archaeologists. But recently the location offered up one more artifact. A recent expedition to the shipwreck recovered several fragments of Greek statues made of bronze and dating back to the 1st century BC, among which was a graceful bronze arm almost perfectly preserved in its entirety, from shoulder to fingertips, and a strange metal disc engraved with the image of a bull. Historians and archaeologists date the wreckage to between 70 and 60 BC, making it over 2,000 years old. At the time of sinking, the ship appeared to be carrying a full cargo of luxury goods such as glassware, gemstones, coins, and jewelry, in addition to the many statues, several of which were thought to be still buried in the seabed awaiting discovery. Although many treasures had been excavated from the seafloor during an expedition in 1976, led by Jacques Cousteau, underwater explorers who conducted the more recent expedition noticed several features about the site that might indicate that even more treasures still remain buried out of sight. Among these clues were a red marble plaque along with a marble statue base that led explorers to continue to excavate and test trench until their suspicions and patience finally paid off. First, wooden hull remains along with large bronze nails and spikes that were used in conjunction of the hull began to be uncovered. While this was an exciting find in itself, the explorers knew there was more below and they kept searching. Finally, they reached what they had unknowingly been searching for. Several remnants of the buried bronze statues were found, including the strange disc with 4 holes drilled in the side and a highly oxidized image. What is thought to be a bull carved on the face. A bronze statue fragment of clothing folds was also uncovered. And then finally the elegantly crafted and beautifully preserved bronze arm emerged. This Antikythera shipwreck is proving to be an incredibly valuable resource of information about what life was like over 2,000 years ago. Much of the evidence of these civilizations has long since been wiped away by the sands of time. But the unswerving sea has protected the secrets of these people so that we can learn more about how they lived. While the simple fragments and pieces that have been discovered might not seem like much, they are priceless glimpses into how people lived millennia ago. The hull fragments and iron nails can tell us a lot about how they constructed their ships and what trading might have been done based on the type of wood used in the hull. The ironworks and mysterious devices tell us about the scientific knowledge of the ancient people, and the bronze arm and other fragments allow us to appreciate and understand the skill of their craftsmen and artists. The Antikythera wreck has essentially provided historians and archaeologists with a window into the civilization that was growing in the years before 70 BC. For 1,000-year-old shipwreck. The Antikythera shipwreck is not the only shipwreck to give historians clues about the past. In fact, it is not even close to being the oldest. The port of Urla is a well-known underwater archaeological city that was a thriving hub of trade and maritime technology in the 17th century BC, and trade at the location has been traced back over 5,000 years. In its prime, the port was the location of trade for the nearby Klasamani, which was an ancient Greek settlement in what is now Turkey. Luckily for historians, but unluckily for the ancient citizens, the city sunk into the ocean as the result of an earthquake over 2,000 years ago, and the salty sea waves preserved numerous shipwrecks in the area from a variety of historical periods, beginning in the 2nd century BC, all the way to the Ottoman period, making the site a perfect spot for underwater excavations and a thriving location of uncovering historical artifacts that can tell us incredible things about the people who came before us. Among the incredible discoveries made at the site are over 200 submerged harbors with their accompanying archaeological remains, 25 berthages, and over 400 anchors from the Bronze Age to the Ottoman period. Then all the wrecks found before. The Research Center for Maritime Archaeology at the University of Ankara found a shipwreck that is believed to date back over 4,000 years. making this discovery the oldest wreck ever found in the Mediterranean and one of the oldest in the entire world, predating the second oldest Mediterranean shipwreck by over 700 years. The head of the expedition, Professor Heel Erkenel, spoke about what a rare event it is to uncover something so ancient, saying, "If we confirm that the sunken ship is 4,000 years old, it will be an important milestone for archaeology. Once its age is confirmed, the information that the wreckage can provide about how people lived, worked, and sailed the seas so many thousands of years ago will almost be unparalleled. The process of simply excavating and preserving the remnants of the ship will not to fully complete. However, the knowledge that we can stand to gain about the ancient people makes the entire process worth it." Currently, based on preliminary evaluations and assessments, historians believe that the ship was used as a trading vessel for the Minoans, who occupied the region from around 3650 BC to about 1400 BC and was capsized possibly due to a storm or natural disaster during a routine trading trip. The previous record holder for the oldest Mediterranean shipwreck was the Alubaran shipwreck off the coast of modern-day Turkey and contained one of the largest and most impressive collections of late Bronze Age artifacts ever discovered in one place. With this wreck in mind, archaeologists are incredibly eager to begin uncovering artifacts from this most recent wreck and begin analysis to understand what technologies, cultures, and practices the ancient people possessed. Untouched Mayan ritual caves, some of the most amazing discoveries are made while searching for something else, as was the case with an unbelievable cave that was discovered on Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. Explorers with the Great Mayan Aquifer Project were hunting for a sacred well below a Mayan city in order to search for the water table that ran below the city. However, what they found instead was an ancient cave system called Balamku, or Jaguar God by the Mayans. The Mayans believed that caves and sinkholes were windows into the underworld, and thus used this set of 7 interconnected caves as ritual offering chambers. So when Guillermo de Ander uncovered the tunnel leading to the cave and managed to crawl on his stomach through the treacherous entryway, he was rewarded with piles and piles of incense burners, pots, and other ritual artifacts that have been sealed away from human eyes for centuries. Although the caves were discovered and briefly mentioned in a report in 1959, the entrances were immediately resealed and forgotten, and the contents inside have lain so undisturbed that stalagmites have grown around the artifacts scattered on the floor. The most important aspect of this find is what it can tell historians about the Mayan civilization at Chichen Itza, such as when it collapsed, as well as more intimate details of what exactly occurred in the ancient Mayan rituals that have been so mysterious and baffling for so long. Diender, the explorer who was the first person inside the cave for many years, spoke about what this means for the archaeological community, saying, "Balamku can tell us not only the moment of collapse of Chichen Itza, it can also probably tell us the moment of its beginning. Now we have a sealed context with a great quantity of information, including usable organic matter, that we can use to understand the development of Chichen Itza." It was truly fortunate that the cave was sealed following its discovery in the late 50s, as now archaeologists can use 3D mapping, paleontology, and many new cutting-edge technologies to analyze the placement and composition of the artifacts, as well as preserve any that they may wish to remove from the caves. We can only wait and see what mysteries might be waiting to be solved. But what do you make of these recent underwater discoveries? Hauntings have always been an area of immense intrigue. From ancient word-of-mouth stories that traveled from generation to generation in the form of moral folktales, warning of evil spirits, to our modern campfire stories and urban horror tales. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 allegedly haunted locations. Old Changi Hospital. This old hospital lies in Singapore. Ever since the hospital was vacated and placed off-bound to the public, countless ghost stories have risen. Rumors circulated of poltergeist activity and spirits of nurses roaming the building. Claims have been made of photographs and videos taken within or outside the hospital, but the authenticity of these have yet to be confirmed. The hospital was built in 1937 by the British government. Its purpose was to be a part of the British military barracks, which had many troops at the time who were supposed to be defending the coastal areas of the Johor Straits. Later, when Singapore was under Japanese occupation, the building was used as a military hospital to serve wounded Japanese soldiers and for Allied prisoners of war. The hospital was part of a prison area managed by the Kempeitai, the Japanese military's secret police, infamous for their cruel brutality. There are multiple unconfirmed claims that the Kempeitai utilized blocks 24 and 37 of the Kitchener barracks as torture chambers. There's a room in the hospital where a chain hangs off the wall, and there are remnants of ill-treatment devices, as well as stains from blood on the floor and walls. In 1947, after World War II, the British RAF set up a base, using the hospital for themselves once again for military care, from 1947 to 1971. Singapore gained its independence in August of 1965, and from 1965 to 1971, the British forces began to slowly withdraw from the nation. Despite this, the hospital was eventually taken over by the SAF, the Singapore Air Force. The SAF hospital cared for military members and their families. In 1976, the hospital was handed to the Ministry of Health, who managed it until its closure in 1997. After which, the property was given to the Singapore Land Authority, who had security guards defend the now empty structure as trespassing was a prevalent problem, with locals and tourists coming to ghost hunt, vandalize, and even perform satanic rituals, which later resulted in the area being completely fenced up. Eventually, the Singapore Land Authority permitted a short-term rental program, which allowed filmmakers and TV crews to enter and explore the abandoned compound. The hospital then featured on several shows. Unfortunately, by the 2000s the hospital was already in terrible shape, crumbling apart and vandalized. This is considered one of the most haunted places in the country. It's said that the angry spirits of those who passed away during the Japanese occupation, souls of the homeless, and all those who perished in the hospital lurk in the halls. A video sighting of a nurse carrying a baby was published in 2017 and spread through the internet, but has still not been proven as authentic. Noah's right. Knox United Church. Built in 1912, the Knox United Church is one of the most haunted places in Calgary, Canada. There have been various reported close sightings of a woman dressed in 19th century attire, groups of spirits praying, and even knitting. Paranormal investigators have visited the church multiple times in the past and claimed technical difficulties with cameras. Primarily, the camera's full battery life is suddenly dying, and the screen is malfunctioning. Investigators often report a strange sensation of claustrophobia and vertigo. The church organists made a claim that there had been a time they were slapped across their head by a spirit for not playing the organ right, and those who visit the church often report sounds of disembodied mysterious footsteps seemingly following them throughout the sanctuary. Despite this, many accounts of ghostly experiences are actually positive. Many say that the spirits which haunt this place aren't malicious and don't seek to cause harm. They simply share the space with living humans. The church historically has aided the homeless and accepted people of all corners of life, including those of opposing faiths. There's no clear reason as to why the church is purportedly haunted, though the church is old and much could have happened that has now been buried by the sands of time. The church is, after all, the oldest structure in all of Calgary, and had humble beginnings with a congregation of no more than 30. Eventually, the church grew in numbers with the passing of years. There are several notable ghosts which appear to haunt the halls of the church. The aforementioned ghost who slapped the organist. Apparitions of women knitting together. A spirit of a 19th century woman who wanders the pews. A woman dressed in vibrant pink, sitting in a 23rd pew at the back of the church. And the sight of a boy playing. The Banff Spring Hotel in Alberta, Canada. This elusive hotel opened its door to the public in 1888. Ever since it's had a tremendously long, complex, and shocking history. The walls of the hotel has witnessed countless changes and heartbreaking tragedies. Several unfortunate guests have checked into the hotel, only to have never been given a chance to leave again, and those poor souls are thought to haunt the halls of this hotel endlessly, trapped in their own personal abyss. Despite only existing for 132 years, this hotel has been the setting for many people losing their life in a horrifying event, many people taking their own life, and numerous people losing their life due to various accidents. Multiple rooms have been boarded up and become inaccessible to the public, and supernatural happenings are often reported, with some even being recorded. It's easy to be skeptical when it comes to the concept of the paranormal. Yet there is something that pulls one in when hearing of these stories. Skeptics have come and gone when it comes to the subject of this hotel, but there's a plethora of those who claim to have witnessed the paranormal events with their own eyes. Of all the spirits which haunt this place, the bride is the most infamous, her face even being printed on stamps and coins related to the Banff Springs Hotel. No one is quite certain what actually happened to her. As many tales do, the details become lost and convoluted over time. Though the most prevailing theory is the bride fell down the stairs after tripping on her gown sometime in the 1920s, or that her gown touched the open flame of a candle, setting the fabric aflame. Regardless, the story always ends with the bride losing her life on the marble staircase. Rumors state that she can be spotted in the hotel's ballroom, twirling around with her long veil, concealing her surely sorrowful face, and can be seen traversing the staircases, longing for the marriage she never got to experience. There's also the mysterious room 873, or rather there was seeing as this room no longer even exists. However, this room has been permanently shut off from the public after years of complaints about how the spirits which reside in that room fright those who stay there. Those who stayed in room 873 explained that they would be awakened to the sounds of horrendous screams when they turned on the light. They would catch a glimpse of bloodied handprints on the walls, which would disappear before the hotel staff could clean them. The room has been sealed off for good, with no chance of it being reopened in the near future. The story goes that a man attacked his wife and young daughter in that room, resulting in them losing their lives before taking the life of himself. The hotel, however, has denied this, stating that no such thing has ever happened. There are, of course, other notable rooms apart from this one. Many of the hotel's rooms are said to have spectral residents, with claims of pillows being yanked from underneath guests' heads during the night or being physically attacked by an unseen force. Furthermore, there is Sam the bellman, who is often mistaken for being a live employee due to how helpful the spirit he is, aiding the living just as he did when he too was still alive. Sam Macaulay was a bellman during the 1960s and 70s, having passed away in 1975, though it's said he never left the office. He haunts his old office, which is now a guest room, and wanders the hotel in search of people to help. Whether you believe these stories or not, there's no denying there must be at least some truth to the claims of hauntings. The question of do ghosts exist remain unanswered, but it's definitely interesting to consider. Though skepticism is healthy, especially when there's logical explanations to consider alongside the frightening and inexplicable. Old buildings creak and crumble, harsh winds can sound like frightening whimpers, and outside contaminants should always be thought about when discussing hauntings. And yet, even when one is fully armed with logic, it's impossible to fully disprove that these hauntings aren't genuine or real. So what do you make of these haunted locations? Do you believe in ghosts? Across the globe, promises of amazing views from the summit and spectacular trails attract hundreds of thousands of tourists. It's bizarre that, on popular paths, packed with hikers, people still seem to vanish into thin air. Even after search parties and helicopters are called in, not a single shred of evidence is ever found. Where do these people go? So today we'll be taking a look at these three mountain mysteries. Rico Harris was destined for the NBA. He was supposed to have his name in lights alongside the likes of Lamar Odom and Magic Johnson. He moved from Los Angeles, California to Seattle, Washington in order to start a life and a family with his long-term girlfriend. Instead, he vanished without a trace. The talent for basketball and had the height to show for it. Standing at 6 feet 9 inches, Harris was destined for the life of a pro athlete. After attending a community college in the Los Angeles area, he continued his athletic career at California State Northridge, which had a newly formed yet perpetually losing Division I basketball team. The coaches there hoped that Harris would turn their losing streak around and propel them to the top of the college basketball team. Brackets. His career there was short-lived, however, as he suffered from multiple injuries and was frequently disciplined by the coaching staff for his hard partying ways. After college, Harris was asked to join the Harlem Globetrotters due to his immense skill with sinking three-point shots from seemingly impossible distances. He prospered for a while but was again sidelined due to injury and was forced to end his once illustrious basketball career for good. The end of an era led to an increase in personal problems for Rico. He suffered from alcohol and substance abuse, and efforts made by his family to get him clean were of no use. At one point, he was seen begging on the streets for money to buy his next fix. One final attempt made by his family to get him sober resulted in him successfully completing a rehab stint in Los Angeles. When he finished the program, he met and fell in love with Jennifer Song, a visiting insurance broker who lived in Seattle. His life seemed to be getting back on track at long last, and they made plans to move in together and start a family in Seattle. But the happy ending never came. Rico Harris decided to make one last trip to his mother's house in Alhambra, just outside of Los Angeles, before driving up to Seattle the next day. Apparently, he and his mother had a disagreement of some sort, and Harris ended up leaving for Seattle in the late hours of October 9, 2014. Heading north on Interstate 5, Harris was last seen at 10:45 a.m. on October 10th at a gas station just outside of Sacramento, California. He had previously told his girlfriend Jennifer that he was going to rest in the mountains that same day. He was never heard from again. Several days after his disappearance, investigators found his black Nissan Maxima parked in the lot of a country park in Yolo County, California. Harris's credit cards were inside the vehicle, none of which had any charges made after his disappearance. His backpack was later found on the banks of a nearby creek. Contained his phone and phone charger. Investigators looked through the contents of his phone and found videos and selfies that Harris had taken the night of his disappearance, but they all showed Harris displaying happy, unconcerning behavior, like singing along to some songs and remarking on the beauty of the scenery around him. A full-scale investigation was launched, with area police using cadaver dogs and aircraft outfitted with thermographic cameras to scan the heavily forested terrain. Apart from his car and backpack, there was no evidence of Harris anywhere. Investigators were baffled. How could a man so large, 6 feet 9 inches and nearly 300 pounds, disappear without a trace and without a motive? It's been nearly 7 years since Rico Harris seemingly vanished into thin air, and there has been no trace of him since. Steve Fawcett loved the extraordinary. Born in 1944 in Tennessee and raised in Southern California, Fawcett developed an aptitude for extreme sports. A financial advisor by trade, Fawcett used his massive fortune to fund his many record-breaking continent-crossing and death-defying flights, sailing adventures and hot air balloon circumnavigations. He was a friend of billionaire Richard Branson, who frequently funded Fawcett's extreme adventures under his Virgin Global brand. But Fawcett's life wasn't brought to a close during one of his headline-grabbing world record attempts. Instead, Steve Fawcett met his end during a routine, relaxed solo flight on September 3, 2007. Fawcett took off from a private airstrip near Smith Valley, Nevada in the early morning hours of September 3, 2007. He piloted a single-engine Super Decathlon light aircraft that he had flown many times before without issue. However, 6 hours after takeoff, flight controllers sounded the alarm with the relevant authorities that Fawcett had not returned as scheduled. A massive search commenced covering nearly 20,000 square miles of the Sierra Nevada mountain range. The Sierra Nevadas are known for being extremely rocky and inaccessible in many areas, so most of the search had to be done by federal aircraft dispatched by the Federal Aviation Authority and local law enforcement. Richard Branson donated funds to aid the search, as well as hotel magnate Baron Hilton, who owned the airstrip that Fawcett had taken off from. The search spanned multiple law enforcement agencies, as well as private volunteer groups, and was estimated to have cost nearly $2 million. At the time, it was the largest federal recovery effort launched in the history of the United States. Despite the magnitude of the search, Fawcett was never found and was legally declared dead mere weeks later. However, nearly a year to the day of Fawcett's disappearance, a hiker camped out in the remote area of the Sierra Nevada range stumbled upon what looked to be identification cards. Upon further inspection, the cards turned out to be Fawcett's driver's license and his Federal Aviation Authority identification. An air search was quickly launched, with planes scouring the area within hours of the hiker's discovery. Steve Fawcett's plane was found about 750 yards away from where his IDs were found, with investigators confirming the plane as Fawcett's, based on the tailfin numbers of the A search and rescue team, made their way on foot to the site and eventually located 2 large bones at the crash site. Forensic analysis would later conclude that the bones did indeed belong to Fawcett, and the case was closed. So why would a crash like this happen to such an experienced pilot during a routine flight? Meteorologists would later conduct simulations of the weather patterns that were forecasted for that fateful day in September, and concluded that excessive downdrafts around the mountain ridge were too powerful for the small prop plane to handle, and forced Fawcett's plane to smash into the side of the ridge just below the peak of the mountaintop. Where is Genghis Khan's final resting place? Perhaps one of the greatest mountain mysteries of all is that of the burial site of the fabled warrior emperor of China, Genghis Khan. Khan is known for being the founder of the Mongol Empire, which at its height covered most of the Eurasian continent. His great success has often been shrouded in dark tales of the methods employed by his armies to conquer entire cities and countries in one fell swoop. It's estimated that millions of people fell at the hands of Khan the Conqueror, and his reign was stained with the blood of the fallen for all time. When Khan himself met his end, though, he made his wishes to be buried in an unmarked grave known to those closest to him. This was quite the departure from the emperor known for exalting himself as a god among men. This was in line, however, with the practices of the tribe he was born into. Khan met his end on August 18, 1227. He had lived to the old age of 65. While the manner of death is disputed, the date is not. After he died, his body was returned to his birthplace in Mongolia near the Khenti Mountains. The Onon River runs through this area, and many historians have theorized that Khan was buried under the river so that his tomb would never be found. This would align with the legends of kings before him, like the Sumerian king Gilgamesh. The real tragedy and mystery, however, is the sheer amount of people who were chosen to go with him on his journey to the afterlife. These sacrifices were made to ensure that no one alive would ever know where the emperor was buried. Horrific tales were told of the slaves who built the tomb and how they were forced to join Genghis Khan in the same tomb that they had constructed. Additional legends tell tales of entire armies of men sent to protect his tomb, also meeting their untimely end when their watch was concluded, in an effort to protect the location of the emperor's body. The Genghis Khan Mausoleum, located in northern China, was constructed many years later to offer those wishing to worship the great conqueror a place to do so, and to dissuade future attempts at finding his final resting place. But what do you make of these interesting mountain mysteries? Beyond Scared Straight is a popular reality show that was produced by Arnold Shapiro and aired on A&E that follows delinquent teens who seem destined for a lifetime of criminality and are placed in jails and forced to spend a day, and sometimes even a night, interacting with convicted prisoners, experiencing what their own lives will look like if they do not get their acts together. Although the show was incredibly popular, it also drew its own share of controversy, as many said that the theory behind the reform program was flawed and needlessly exposed the children to trauma. However, some of the most memorable characters were not the children, but the inmates themselves who were tasked with leaving an impression on the aberrant teenagers. So today, we will be looking into the interesting and sometimes downright scary stories behind 3 of the inmates who appeared on the show. Big Dragon Rigoberto Rodriguez, better known as Big Dragon, is a memorable personality who appeared in Season 5 of Beyond Scared Straight. Convicted in a double homicide that occurred in 2010, the imposing man cut a terrifying figure as he spoke to the teens in handcuffs, a belly shackle and leg restraints, with correction officers leveling tasers at him throughout the entire encounter. He remained eerily calm as he talked about his experiences that led to him being incarcerated, which included a grisly double-taking of life that resulted in charges of 2 counts of first-degree convictions of conspiracy, armed robbery, and tampering with evidence. The couple's lives that he took were reputedly narcotic dealers who had shorted Big Dragon in several deals. Rodriguez decided to take matters into his own hands and instructed his girlfriend to arrange a deal with the couple, which would take place at their home. When the time of the deal arrived, Rodriguez's girlfriend remained in the car while he and an accomplice entered the home and brutally took the lives of the couple, shooting the man in the head and slashing the throat of the woman and then robbing the home. Because of these 2 first-degree charges, Big Dragon is serving 2 life sentences, in addition to multiple years added on for the lesser crimes, which will ensure that he remains in prison for the rest of his life. He warned the kids against following in his path, directing his words at one teenager in particular who did not appear to be taking his warnings seriously, saying, "I'll make you my bitch, fool. I'm going to be in here for the rest of my life. I'm good with faces. I'll remember you, fool. Everyone gets their ass beat when they first come in. That's mandatory." Despite the horrific charges against him, it seems that he might regret the path that his life has taken, as he tells the kids to think about their choices and be sure to make good ones, insisting that it's not worth it. "I chose that life." He shows an emotional side as he tells the teenagers, "All my little brothers have been locked up. When I see my brothers handcuffed like this, it makes me sad. It makes me want to cry, dog, because I blame myself because I could have showed them better." Regardless of his remorse, it is relieving that someone who is capable of committing such cold-blooded, horrific crimes is safely behind bars for the rest of his life. Dakota Joe, whose real name is Chad Ferguson, is one of the more memorable inmates on Beyond Scared Straight, simply because of how visibly disturbing he seems. From his comments in the show to his extensive and varied criminal history, it is clear that he enjoys the thrill of committing crimes and manipulating others without thought for how they might be affected. He is a self-proclaimed popular guy in the prison, introducing himself by saying, "They call me Dakota Joe and I am the coolest guy in jail." But those are bragging rights that you just don't want. Although he is friendly and jocular as he banters with the teens, he quickly turns serious and intimidating when he has enough of one of the teenagers' challenging manner as he tells Dakota Joe to see him when he gets out. Dakota begins detailing just a few of the horrible things that might happen to the boy if he ever went to prison, such as man-pond and reminding the young boy that he would not be able to handle time in jail. In the show, Dakota Joe is serving 1.5 to 3 years' time for violation of probation and driving while suspended, although his criminal history is much more extensive. He broke into and burglarized a high school on 3 separate occasions and was caught almost a month later after leading police on a 4-hour search of a local grocery that resulted in him being apprehended hiding in the metal ventilation duct of the store. The search yielded the additional discovery of money and bank bags that were tied to 3 restaurant burglaries, resulting in charges of 6 counts of burglaries and 5 years of probation with 94 days in jail. He racked up several other charges in the years following, including receiving stolen property, being with a minor in possession of alcohol, third-degree the probation violation that forced him into jail and resulted in his appearance on the show. He also admits on the show that he broke into a church to steal simply for the thrill, underlining the fact that, although he is not serving serious time, he is a criminal who should be given a wide berth. However, like many of the other inmates on the show, Dakota Joe also has words of advice for the young delinquents and counsels them to turn their lives around, so that they can avoid the same path as him. Seemingly regretful, he reminds them that time incarcerated is no joking matter, and that he never wanted to be in this situation, ending with the words, "All I want now is to be free." Hopefully he left an impression on the youngsters and convinced them to turn their lives around rather than live a life skirting the law as he has. Diabla. Although thinking of hardened criminals and scary inmates often brings to mind images of burly, muscular, and powerful men, one of the most intimidating and frightening appearances on Beyond Scared Straight was made by Diabla, the street name of a woman imprisoned in the Chowchilla facility. Although she does not delve very deeply into her backstory or the crimes that led to her that she is a cold-blooded killer, chillingly stating, "I don't do drive-bys. I wanted to smoke you in person to see you die." She references the meaning behind her name, Devil, and says that that's what all my homies call me, Baby Devil. I got set on fire at 2 years old, stabbed, drowned, beat repeatedly, and makes it clear that she is someone to take seriously. Diabola takes her around the corner where there are no cameras and tells her, I want you to hit me. Let's get this over with. After which she hits the wall over the young girl's head in an effort to be intimidating that is clearly successful. Threatening, violent, and clearly dangerous, it is obvious that inside the walls of the prison, Diabola will take absolutely no disrespect or insult and will react quickly and violently to quell any perceived slight, a point that she drives home to her young visitors. One of the most memorable moments from Diabola's time on the show occurs when she confronts a young girl, Emily, who has been disrespecting and mistreating her mother. When Diabola learns of this behavior, she tells Emily to hit me like you hit your mama, and promises her that if she doesn't straighten up and get her act together, Emily will have Diabola as both her mother and father, and promises that Emily will become Diabola's new roommate in the prison if she ever disrespects her mother again. As with the other inmates on the show, Diabola leaves the teenagers with something to consider after they leave their day in prison. She uses her energy and personality to attempt to get the kids to understand that they need to change their ways before they end up in the same situation as her. In a rare moment of emotion, Diabola actually tears up slightly as she talks about her young daughter who suffered from cancer at only 2 years old. She entreats a teenage girl present, whose mother is also an inmate at the Chowchilla prison, to forgive your mother, be better than us, and then says that if I'm in here and I'm not giving up, how dare you have the audacity to be free and give up on life like that? If the reactions of the teenagers are any indication, it is clear that Diabola's emotional, not to mention her volatile and aggressive behaviors, have made a distinct impression on the teenage visitors. Although the purpose of the show was to bring delinquent teenagers into prisons and let the prisoners scare them into changing their ways and leading a life away from the jails, it is clear that the inmates also left many lasting impressions on the audience of the show as well. Even though the show is no longer on air, Beyond Scared Straight provided an interesting and occasionally unnerving glimpse inside incarceration facilities and the sometimes downright scary inmates who are serving time within. But what do you make of these 3 inmate stories, and did they really have regret? One question that can cause an instant divide within a room is the simple, do you believe in ghosts? You'll most likely be met with a chorus of devoted believers, avid deniers, and the people caught somewhere in between. Well, any skeptics amongst us, prepare to be convinced of the supernatural, and to those of us who already believe, sit back and enjoy. So today, we will be taking a look at 3 mysterious buildings and the tragedies behind them. The Winchester House Secret Room. Winchester House has been a mystery in the making for over a century, built over the course of 38 years with construction beginning in 1884. Though the tales and eeriness linger even today. It took nearly 4 decades to create this masterpiece of a historical building, which is known today for its labyrinth of corridors and rooms. It's no wonder some of them hold rather dark stories. You might think our story begins in 1906 with the tale of an earthquake, an attic, and an heiress. And whilst this is the most famous story behind the ongoings at Winchester, the history has a sad and deep truth leading up to this. Sarah Winchester, who commissioned the house, lost her daughter in 1866, just 4 years into her marriage. This loss was shortly followed by the death of her father-in-law in 1880, and then her husband in 1881, just 1 year after. With so many consecutive tragedies, Sarah became convinced she was cursed. She had a life riddled with paranoia and turned to a medium to help find answers, solutions, and explanations. Perhaps not the one she had hoped to hear. Sarah was told that for each life that had been taken by a Winchester rifle, their spirit would return as a ghost to haunt not only the house, but also Sarah and her family. According to some, such as the Smithsonian Magazine, the medium advised that Sarah should move out to California, where the Winchester house now stands. The medium allegedly also told Sarah to begin to build a home that would satisfy these spirits, ghosts, and ghouls, and alleviate the family curse. Heeding this warning, Sarah left Connecticut behind and began building in 1884 in California. Some speculate that the construction crews worked for 24 hours a day, every day of the week until Sarah's death in 1922. This supposed fact has since been debunked by historian Mary Jo Ignafo, who stated to California Home Design that Winchester's own letters explain that she sent workers away for months at a time. This staggered and strange design process, whether that is continuous labor or months of inactivity, has certainly led to a bizarre set of architectural features within this house, with staircases that lead to nowhere, doors with nothing behind, windows that overlook rooms, and the seemingly endless maze design. The house reached a staggering 7 stories before an earthquake in 1906 knocked the highest 3 down. Many modern-day visitors have guessed that the confusing maze-like design was intentional, a way to mislead the ghosts and deter them. Perhaps Sarah hadn't heard they could walk through walls. Then again, our more level-headed historian, Ignofo, concluded that the random doors and staircases that we can see today were simply quick fixes to seal off the damage this landmark had seen as a result of the earthquake. During the 1906 earthquake, Sarah became trapped inside the attic room, stuck listening to the winds raging outside. Sarah concluded that the spirits were angry, prompting the earthquake as a symbol of their discontent, and her short time in captivity was a form of punishment. She boarded up the attic she had become trapped in and never entered it again. This room remained hidden away for over a century. Before 2016, descriptions of the house detailed 40 staircases, 2,000 doors, 47 fireplaces, and upwards of 10,000 windows. It wasn't until 2016, however, that the attic room was stumbled across, despite the lengths of this house being stumbled through countless times. This brought the room count up to a staggering 161. Monte Cristo Historic Homestead. Another haunted home based upon a tragedy is the Monte Cristo built in Australia. The original homeowner and builder of this home was one Christopher Crawley, though the tragic tale really commences when his wife Elizabeth took over the home in 1910 upon her husband's death. Grief-stricken at the loss of her husband, Elizabeth spent the remainder of her life within the walls of the house, leaving only twice before her death. She converted the box room into a chapel and became highly religious, turning to the Bible for comfort and support. Elizabeth was tied so closely to her home, believed to have just left twice before her death due to a burst appendix, that many think she stays there still today, as her ghost is now said to haunt the building. The death and haunting of Elizabeth Crawley appears to have been a catalyst to supernatural unexplained noises and orbs as well as phantom-like sounds. The events that have followed the initial death include the violent death of a maid who fell from a second-floor balcony, a woman walking in a period dress seen as either a figure or silhouette, leaving blood-stained footsteps behind as she walks along the veranda, the ghost of Harold, and a stable boy who lost his life due to a fire. Paranormal researchers have said that he is now thought to linger by the coach house. For 40 years, Harold had been chained up within the caretaker's cottage. He had been found lying by his mother's deceased body and was promptly sent to a home for the insane, as indelicately described at the time. Today, you will know if Harold is drawing near by the sound of chains clanking together. Marketed as the most haunted house in Australia, Monte Cristo lives on as a popular spot for thrill seekers and believers of the supernatural to visit when in Australia, with tours of the house offered each Saturday at 6 p.m. for over 15-year-olds. This isn't a tour for the faint of heart. A tour around Monte Cristo could certainly cement your belief in the supernatural or convert you to an avid believer if you aren't already. Virginia Beach Ferry Plantation House. The hauntings at Ferry Plantation House have been difficult to trace to a start date. Though records of supernatural activity have been documented in the 20th and 21st century, we can't assess just how far the history of this particular house goes. Whilst the building is tricky to assess, the land is less difficult to navigate. Once belonging to the indigenous Chesapeake tribe, this land was taken over during colonization within the 17th century. This has been assessed as an accurate placement of both these groups upon a historical timeline, supported by the archaeological discovery of pottery, jewelry, and the heads of arrows. The name Ferry Plantation House is derived from the ferry services established in 1636 and 1642. The second ferry service, created by Seville Gascon in 1642, brought a new demographic to Virginia, largely made up of the wealthy and slaves. The neighborhood was held in high esteem, one of wealth and significance, at least until the burning of the Wolk family mansion, the family who owned and ran the local tavern in 1828. The Ferry Plantation House attracts many guests throughout the year, and whilst some visit for the federal architecture and insights into colonial life, many seek out the rumored 11 ghosts that lurk here. The most commonly reported sightings: southeast wing of the house. In its prime, the house seemed to have strange behavior tied to it. Even when the house had no residents, lights would mysteriously be on, an occurrence that still happens today, according to volunteers. This has been particularly common on the third floor. Some of the well-known ghosts residing at the Ferry Plantation House include Henry, a slave seeking revenge, Sally Rebecca Wolk, who cries and grieves for her partner, and the Lady in White, whose ghost has been seen falling down the stairs. Many guests also have experienced the cries of those who fell victim to a shipwreck in 1810. Perhaps the most famous spirit to encounter, however, is the Witch of Pungo. Grace White Sherwood was a farmer and midwife within the 1700s. Described as being both beautiful and medically skilled, it was not long before she was deemed a witch by much of society. Whilst herbal remedies, which Grace was highly skilled in, were once viewed as everyday things, times had changed and women using medicinal herbs were thought to be interacting with the devil, and many midwives were accused, with plenty thinking it was the perfect profession to sacrifice people to the devil. Grace was put on trial and taken to court multiple times throughout her lifetime, taking the blame for poor harvests, for livestock that continued to pass away, and even the bad weather. Despite these numerous accusations, it wasn't until 1706 that Grace was deemed guilty when she was blamed for the miscarriage of Elizabeth, the woman accusing her. Grace did not pass the trial by water test she had been placed on, floating to the surface of the water, or according to those in charge, being rejected by the holy water. She was imprisoned, eventually dying, locked up before her name had been cleared. Grace lies beneath the grounds of Ferry Plantation House, and many guests report seeing her presence alongside the other 10 spirits whilst visiting. Have these ghost stories convinced you of the supernatural, or will you have to book a tour to see if you believe the full story? World is filled with mysteries for us to discover, with nature posing some of the most peculiar happenings. Whether it is a theory, prediction, or hypothesis that has turned out to be the opposite to what we anticipated, or an evolutionary adaptation we cannot quite figure out, nature is wonderful but confusing to say the least. So today we will be looking at 3 nature-themed discoveries you may have missed. The Ross Ice Shelf is freezing, not melting. In 2017, a rather strange discovery was made in regard to the Ross Ice Shelf, the largest shelf of ice in Antarctica. This ice shelf, which has some points which reach an astonishing 10,000 feet thick, is one of many shelves which contain, restrain, and generally hold back the ice of West Antarctica. It is estimated that if the Ross Ice Shelf does one day collapse, then the global sea level has the capability of rising by 10 feet. In November of 2017, a team of scientists from New Zealand investigated the Great Ross Ice Shelf, using a hot water drill to create a tunnel-like gap for a thermometer and camera to go underneath the surface level. This technique gives us a snapshot of the environment below surface level, cluing scientists in as to the history of this ginormous shelf, as well as giving us more information as to what exactly it is doing now and the possible future happenings. With thoughts focused on global warming, this research team anticipated finding melting ice, though this is not the conclusion that the temperature and currents indicated. Contrary to expectations, the water beneath the Ross Ice Shelf seemed to be freezing, and Christina Hulb, a glaciologist from the University of Otago in New Zealand, was a co-leader on the project and summed up the strangeness of this discovery in 4 simple words when talking to National Geographic. It blew our minds. Plans to monitor the future of the Ross Ice Shelf have already been implemented, with the 2017 research team leaving instruments behind in order to measure currents and temperatures within the hole over the following years. The freezing of the ice shelf seems promising, suggesting it is plenty stable, at least for the time being. Scientists are also optimistic that the findings from this study will let us see if there have been any changes or melting that has happened in the past as a direct result of climate shifts. Despite the overwhelmingly positive findings of this particular study, the climate crisis remains a prevalent and concerning threat to our planet, and one that is worsening at an accelerated and rapidly increasing pace. Global warming and the melting of ice caps is an issue we continue to face, with NASA confirming that we are losing ice in Antarctica at a quicker pace with each passing year. Whilst we are yet to determine exactly why we are seemingly so lucky with the peculiar freezing of the Ross Ice Shelf, it certainly is a positive sign that we are not facing the looming threat of the ice shelf collapsing anytime soon. Greenland ice lakes drain at the speed of Niagara Falls. Greenland's ice sheet hosts lakes upon its surface, though these lakes seem to be making their own way through the ice sheet at a pace that is even quicker than Niagara Falls. The lakes on the surface of Greenland's ice sheet certainly are not just dripping though. The water appears to be draining through the ice sheet, which is a kilometer thick. The ice sheets of Greenland melt slightly during the heat of the summertime, leaving pools of water on top, forming the so-called lakes, often spanning kilometers in width. These huge lakes then drained through the remaining ice sheet, though researchers were left scratching their heads as to how exactly this happens, and perhaps more specifically, as to how quickly it happens. Many have been concerned that global warming would result in the melted lake water increasing in volume, having a disastrous impact on the surface. Upon the ice sheet, the guess as to what could happen as a result of this increased water was that it could essentially lubricate the base of the ice sheet, making the water slide far too quickly into the ocean. Though a 2006 research study suggests that the impact of melted lakes is much less significant than first anticipated. Sarah Das, lead researcher from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, U.S., alongside the rest of her team, set up their stations beside a lake spanning 3 kilometers in the west of Greenland. 30 minutes after having detected rumbles within the ice with their seismometers, the lake began to drain, having completely disappeared within an hour and a half. Das stated the most surprising thing was the speed. The rapid draining was credited to a fracture within the ice, caused by the weight of the water, with the crack believed to have reached through the entire depth of the ice sheet, a kilometer thick. Yet another strange scientific finding to come from this study is what happens to the melted lake once it reaches the bottom of the ice sheet. Within only a day, according to Das and her team, the water had drained away completely. A separate study, led by Ian Joffin, from the University of Washington, used satellite of Greenland's ice sheet and glaciers. Through this longitudinal research, his team found that each year, in the summertime, the ice sheets moved towards the ocean at an increasing rate, getting between 50 and 100% faster each year after summer sun hits. However, this finding was not consistent. Glaciers, which typically flow at a greater pace than the rest of the ice sheet, sped up by less than 15% once the sun was out, slower than the surrounding ice. It has been determined that this unexplained effect has the potential to save Greenland. If this strange phenomenon was not at play, then the lubrication of the melted lake water has the potential to reduce the icy Greenland landscape by 10 to 25% over the course of the 21st century. Joffin summarizes the complex scientific conclusions with this statement. The good news is that the increased melting does not seem like it's going to cause a runaway effect like some people had predicted. Whilst nature seems to have equipped the ice sheet with some built-in defense mechanisms against our global warming, the impact is certainly not negligible. Global warming does appear to be speeding up the glacier flow, if the lubrication increases. One researcher, Conrad Stephan of the University of Colorado, holds this opinion and provides the dead glacier in Greenland as evidence, which was believed to be dead after being stagnant for decades before suddenly becoming active, speeding up by 80% throughout the summertime. He suggests these fluctuations are not necessarily immediate causes for concern. Remains crucial that the climate crisis does not continue to worsen. This strange scientific phenomenon is yet to be understood, but seems to be keeping potential environmental disasters at bay. Antarctic seals may use Earth's magnetic field to navigate while hunting. It has been well established that the adorable Weddell seals have biologically adapted to acquire the ability to dive hundreds of meters deep to hunt for their food, yet are able to accurately find breathing holes on the ice's surface whenever they need to. In 2014, the researchers backed by the National Science Foundation think they have found the answers as to how they have developed this bizarre ability, the Earth's magnetic field. According to researcher Randall Davis of the Department of Marine Biology at Texas A&M University, these seals seem to use the magnetic field of the Earth to create a sort of natural GPS. He said, "This animal may be highly evolved with the ability to navigate using magnetic sense to find ice holes some distance apart and get back to them safely." Should this theory ring true, then this is the first evidence of an evolutionary trait like this being present in a marine mammal. Despite residing mostly underwater, in aquatic environments, these seals still need frequent access to oxygen to breathe. With so much energy being used with each dive taken, it is simply inefficient to entirely resurface each and every time they need oxygen. And even worse, should the animals fail to accurately locate a hole in the ice, they will drown. This evolutionary tactic in Weddell seals has been a key part of research since the late 1990s, when this team first began investigating how they follow magnetic lines. The precision of their movements, as shown in the data collected, was astonishing, with seals being able to accurately return to dive holes repeatedly. Aside from the magnetic field, another factor possibly cluing in these seals could be sound, with these fantastic seals receiving acoustic cues from other Weddell seals, letting them know where the breathing holes are. Both the teamwork and the magnetic field hypotheses can be clarified with further data collection, filling us in on precisely where the vocalization is coming from or seeing changes in behavior as the seals enter a new line of the magnetic field. These fantastically evolved marine mammals have still left us with some questions, but the research ahead promises fascinating results. But what do you make of these three discoveries? Space is a vast and largely unexplored place. Advancing technology and the development of our scientific understanding has helped us to find out more about what lies beyond our planet and has opened up the door to future exploration. Its multitude has allowed for many aspects to go unknown since humans first left Earth and have experienced life outside of our planet. Something to note, though, is that not every discovery made by NASA and other space agencies are understood. Sometimes these discoveries confuse even the best scientists. Back in 1997, a mysterious plume was detected by the Hubble Space Telescope coming from Mars. The European Space Agency said the following on their website: "Plumes seen reaching high above the surface of Mars are causing a stir among scientists," going on to say the following: "On two separate occasions in March and April 2012, amateur astronomers reported plume-like features developing on the planet. The plumes were seen rising to altitudes of over 250 kilometers above the same region of Mars on both occasions. By comparison, similar features seen in the past have not exceeded 100 kilometers. At around 250 kilometers, the division between the atmosphere and outer space is very thin, so the reported plumes are extremely unexpected. The features developed in less than 10 hours, covering an area of up to 1,000 to 500 kilometers, and remain visible for around 10 days, changing their structure from day to day. None of the spacecraft orbiting masts saw the features because of their viewing geometries and illumination conditions at the time. However, checking archived Hubble Space Telescope images between 1995 and 1999, and databases of amateur images spanning 2001 to 2014, revealed occasional clouds at the limb of Mars, usually up to 100 kilometers in altitude. But one set of Hubble images from the 17th of May 1997 revealed an abnormally high plume, similar to that spotted by the amateur researchers in 2012. Scientists are now working on determining the nature and chord of the plumes by using the Hubble data in combination with the images taken by amateurs. One idea we've discussed is that the features are caused by a reflective cloud of water ice, carbon dioxide ice, or dust particles. But this would require exceptional deviations from standard atmospheric circulation models to explain cloud formations at such high altitudes. Another idea is that they're relative to an aurora emission, and indeed auroras have been previously observed at these locations, linked to a known region on the surface where there is a large anomaly in the crustal magnetic field. The jury is still out on the nature of these curious high-altitude Martian plumes. NASA went on to say the following: "There's also other interesting features that appear in this image. The northwestern portions of the planet are enveloped in unusually thick water ice clouds, similar to cirrus clouds on Earth. Some clouds extend as far as Lunaplanum, the slightly darker region about halfway from the center to the left side of the map. The dark spot near the terminator boundary between day and night, at around 9 a.m. in the June 27th planet image, is a 27 kilometers high volcano, protruding through the clouds. A remnant North Polar camp, composed of water ices at the top of the May and June images, and a bluish South Polar hood, composed of water ice clouds, is seen along the southern edge. Because the planet's axis is tipped towards us during this season, we cannot see the South Polar camp, which is in winter darkness. This isn't the only mysterious discovery made on Mars. The prospect of life on Mars has long been a topic of debate. Our second mystery investigates known organic material found on Mars and where it may have come from. After sending the Curiosity rover to seek answers about this planet, NASA has found evidence from rocks on Mars that leads scientists to believe that ancient life could have been supported there. Although news of the evidence cannot confirm life on Mars yet, it provides us with more information regarding the planet's history. This new discovery takes the form of two unusual intricacies, the first one being what is known as organic molecules. Organic molecules consist of many elements including carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Whilst these elements are often associated with life, organic molecules aren't unquestionably signs of life. They can be created through non-biological processes and therefore cannot currently provide evidence of life on Mars. The Curiosity rover was still able to drill material from mudstone, which are a type of sedimentary rock. They took samples of the mudstone originating billions of years ago from a specific site in the Gale crater. After careful examination, some particles were found to contain sulfur, which could have been a preserving factor. Further evaluation of the material resulted in the findings of astonishing levels of organic carbon concentrations. This level of carbon can be closely related to the levels found in Martian meteorites, and much greater than what would have been found on the surface of Mars. Chlorine was also found within the rocks in 2013, alluding to ancient debris. These findings are a step in the right direction and continue to motivate scientists to dig deeper and delve into their curiosity. It's only further encouraged the scientific community to search for answers and evidence of life. The second discovery consists of a pattern found in the release of methane on Mars over the years. Observing seasonal variations in the methane on Mars could conceivably point to ancient human life. In one study, scientists argue this possibility after studying the peak in warmer months and drop off in the cooler months each year over the course of 6 years. The duration of this pattern leads us to question why this methane is present, and if it could point to life. With NASA's plans to further explore this planet in the future, who's to say this mystery will remain unsolved? What you make of these space discoveries? According to the recently obtained Freedom of Information Act records that were gathered by the news site The Drive, the document claimed that 3 unmanned aerial vehicles buzzed 3 destroyers for several days. The mysterious aircrafts were described in the logs as unmanned aerial vehicles, and as of right now it's not known what these unidentified crafts are. The document states that 3 unidentified objects chased and flew circles around 3 U.S. warships, and this was off the coast of California in 2019, with the reports going on to detail that one of these objects was able to match the speed and bearing of one destroyer for over 90 minutes. So far, all this information has come directly from details released from the ship's logs. The USS Kidd was one of these ships that were approached by these mysterious objects. As of right now, many sites are labeling these crafts as drones, but in the official ship's logs, they are described as being unidentified aerial crafts. The logs go into detail that as many as 6 of these crafts were observed flying around the ship, saying that these objects were seen performing brazen maneuvers. The logs went on to detail the following. Kid reported UAV overhead. White light identified hovering over the ship's flight deck. 2 UAVs spotted off the starboard wing. 6 minutes later, 4 UAVs spotted of the starboard bridge. End quote. It's interesting to note that these Navy vessels are equipped with some of the best tech on the planet, including sensors, radar, thermal imaging, and electro-optical systems. However, none of them were able to track and explain what these unidentified crows were. Due to not being able to get an answer for what these crows were, the Navy reached out to the Coast Guard, FBI, and other agencies to try and get an answer for what was flying around them. However, the investigation failed to turn up with an answer. Some have gone on to question whether these unidentified crafts were observing the shims. After all, this isn't the first time that unidentified crafts have been reported near our shims. In fact, ex-servicemen have come forward in detail at the mysterious encounters with these crafts. Due to them being seen and reported around bodies of water, researchers have said these are different to standard unidentified flying objects, and it's caused them to be given the name of unidentified submerged objects. These USOs are reported to look very similar to that of UFOs, and it's caused some to question whether the two are different, or whether normal UFOs have the ability to go underwater without being detected. They go back many years and sometimes come from very credible sources. In one instance that the former U.S. Navy Commander David Fravor narrated, he saw a dark mass underwater while they were retrieving a drone from flying practice and described it as a big mass kind of circular. The second time the pilot saw the dark mass, a practice torpedo that the pilot had been sent to recover was sucked down into the ocean, in the presence of an underwater mass that was never to be seen again. USOs are normally passed off as common objects which are distorted below the surface, but trained Navy personnel are more familiar with the ocean. So when military officials claim to have witnessed a USO or UFO sighting, it automatically becomes more credible. Reports of USOs go back years, with some even being detected by nuclear submarines. Rigged with the most sensitive listening technology in the world. People who wish to remain anonymous have detailed their encounters with these unidentified submerged objects. In 2007, an eyewitness of the coast of Half Moon Bay, California claims she observed 3 UFOs while traveling on the cruise ship Dawn Princess, renamed in 2017 as Pacific Explorer. The witness claimed 3 objects came into view, all uniform with each other, evenly spread in a line, parallel to the ship's hull and hovering just above the water surface. Nearly spherical objects, glowing in the sky, appeared to stay in one place while the ship moved past them. They were hovering but didn't disturb the water just below them. Just as they went out of sight, the far left object splashed and disappeared into the water. Another person who was on a cruise ship detailed a similar incident, saying that while approaching Florida, she and her husband saw a mysterious circular object enter the water. She said that this object was shaped like a disc, and that when it entered the water, there was no disturbance. She said that her husband had been a pilot for over 30 years, and that he'd never seen anything that matched what they saw. She said that after the craft went into the water, they tried to look around to see if it would reemerge, but it didn't. It's interesting that the Navy and other military branches are being more open to the idea of UFOs. Those who have seen UFOs have said it's nice that they're starting to be taken more seriously. Another thing to note is that under a new law, the U.S. will have to release everything they know about unidentified flying objects. And perhaps this could be a way of warming us up to the things that they're going to release. Regardless, believers have said they're excited, and that it's about time that the people were told the truth about what's going on. It's important to remember that over 80% of our ocean remains unexplored, and that every year scientists and researchers are still making incredible discoveries beneath the waves. In fact, it's said that every year scientists discover between 1,000 to 2,000 new species, showcasing just how little we know about the underwater world. Underwater, archaeologists are even finding ancient ruins beneath our oceans, showing us that at one point in time people would have lived there. It's likely that as the years go on, scientists and amateur researchers are going to find more interesting discoveries. Whether they will agree on what they found, though, is another matter. So what do you make of this interesting report? What do you think the USS Kidd was approached by? Do you think it was a UFO? An unidentified submerged object? Or something like a high-tech drone? Sometimes it might seem as though humans have invaded every nook and cranny on the planet and have made it impossible for Mother Nature to hide anything from our prying eyes. However, as we will discover time and time again, there are still innumerable wild and untamed places on the face of the earth where humans can go, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and then never be seen or heard from again. Tragically, many who go missing after entering the tangle of the wilderness across the globe are often only found once it's too late or are found right in the nick of time after being at Mother Nature's mercy. So today we will be looking at 3 sometimes tragic discoveries in and around the still wild mountains and national parks. Man found in Zion National Park has been identified. Sometimes simple trips into Mother Nature to explore her beauty can be more treacherous than one might think. Seemingly safe and well-traveled pleasure hikes can be just as dangerous to hikers as those trails and areas that are so deeply hidden and isolated. Sometimes months of preparation and supplies are needed before entering these trails. It is for this reason that national park rangers are highly trained in tracking, rescue, and other life-saving techniques as they keep an eye on the wild forest and make sure that the people who hike through it return safe. However, sometimes people fall into danger despite their best efforts, as was the case when 42-year-old Corbin McMillan of St. George, Utah left to go hiking on a Thursday in late February 2021 at Angel's Landing in Zion National Park. Upon being reported missing, the Zion National Park Rangers immediately conducted a search and around midnight that same night found his abandoned vehicle at the Grotto Trailhead, which leads to Angel's Landing. When his car was still unoccupied at the trailhead the next morning, a formal search was initiated and a thorough sweep of the park began. Tragically, officials announced later that Friday that they had located what they later identified as McMillan's body, the base of Moonlight Buttress, whose summit is part of the West Rim Trail not far from Angel's Landing. The officials reported in their statement that his fatal injuries were consistent with the fall from the summit of the Moonlight Buttress, although the investigation is still ongoing by the Washington County Sheriff's Office, and an official cause of him losing his life has not been announced. Nature can be incredibly unforgiving, treacherous, and even deadly at times, and those who are forced to tangle with the brutal elements of the wilderness and are able to live to tell the tale should count themselves incredibly lucky, for that is tragically not always the case. Teen hiker found alive after spending night in the freezing temperatures. Although not every lost hiker story has a happy ending, there are some stories of those who managed to survive the harrowing conditions. Such is the case in the story of 15-year-old Britton Kelsey, who was one of the ones lucky enough to be at the mercy of nature and live to tell the tale. Kelsey and his family, along with several others, left to go hiking at Red Mountain Trail, which is a stretch of remote hiking area north of St. George, Utah. The expedition split off into 2 groups, and when they reunited at the end of the trip, Kelsey was not in either group and was reported missing by his family. Several search parties led by 2 local sheriff deputies were immediately sent out in helicopters to search the land around where the groups had been hiking. They had to call off the search for the night around midnight, when temperatures were already dropping into the 20-degree Fahrenheit range. The family became increasingly frantic and the outlook was grim, as Kelsey had only been wearing shorts and a sweatshirt and was not prepared to endure the weather and wilderness in such clothing. The hunt for Kelsey resumed the following morning as soon as it was light, although hope that he had survived the freezing cold temperatures in the night were dwindling. Deputies and rescue crews combed the area on foot and at long last discovered a pair of shoe prints that matched those of the teenager. The crew and medical personnel followed the prints, preparing for the worst, but were led instead to Kelsey, who had miraculously survived and was reunited with his very relieved family. Although he was immediately rushed to the hospital and treated for hypothermia as a result of his night in the freezing weather, Kelsey is expected to make a full recovery and is very lucky to be able to say that he survived such a harrowing ordeal. Spending the night in below freezing temperatures without proper clothing is incredibly dangerous, let alone spending the night in those freezing temperatures in a wild, uninhabited area full of dangerous animals and unfamiliar territory. Hypothermia is a result of exterior temperatures plummeting so low that your body can no longer your body temperature begins to fall, affecting all organ and tissue systems. Once hypothermia sets in, between 12 and 40% of all individuals are unable to recover and eventually succumb, depending on how severe the case is. Records show that around 20,000 people die from hypothermia in Britain every year, with 25,000 annual deaths in the United States and 8,000 deaths in Canada. So although Kelsey's young age undoubtedly helped him weather the ordeal without any lasting damage, there is no question that he is extremely fortunate to be reunited with his family, as not all missing hiker stories have such a happy ending. Melanie Melanson disappearance. While hikers assume an inherent risk by entering uninhabited wilds, sometimes people can disappear into the wilderness much closer to home, never to be seen again. Melanie Melanson was a 14-year-old in Woburn, Massachusetts who attended a high school party in the woods outside of town with about a dozen other older boys on a brisk fall night in October 1989. The kids were drinking and partying until the early hours of the morning, when it dwindled to just Melanie and two other boys, Gene Bertini and Jimmy Tresca. Jimmy wanted to return home and offered Melanie a ride to her friend's house where she would be spending the night, but she declined in order to spend more time with Gene. Melanie and Gene left the woods and walked back towards the town together, where Gene had parked his motorcycle. He only had one helmet and so did not offer Melanie a ride home, and reported that as he drove away, he saw her walking the opposite direction off her friend's house back towards the woods. However, as he was under the influence, he did not think to stop and ask what she was doing and if she needed any help. Melanie was never seen again. Unfortunately, Melanie's parents were known substance abusers and Melanie frequently ran away to escape from them. So when she did not return home that night and for several nights after, investigators assumed that she might have run away towards Florida and lost valuable search days as they waited for her to return. As the days passed and she did not return, investigators theorized that the outcome of that night took a much more sinister turn. The current theory is that Melanie was killed in the woods and that her body was moved several times after. Gene and Jimmy both tell conflicting stories of the night that Melanie went missing, and Jimmy's car was mysteriously missing and reported stolen the week after the incident. Search dogs trained for human remains alerted officers at several different locations in the woods, close to where the party was, but no human remains were ever found when the area was excavated, which led investigators to conclude that Melanie had indeed been buried or hidden around the area, and possibly moved multiple times before her body was eventually removed by whoever killed her. Many believe that it was Jimmy and Gene who killed her and then worked together to hide the body, although the evidence against them is mainly based on rumor and gossip. Aside from their conflicting accounts of the events, it was widely reported that Gene had been cheating on his girlfriend with Melanie, and both Gene and Jimmy's girlfriends have about what happened that night, despite both being in attendance. Jimmy's stepfather was a police officer in Woburn, and shortly after the incident, retired and moved the entire family to Florida. Gene went on to live a life filled with violence and was most notably arrested after pistol whipping and robbing two teenagers at a gas station and then refusing DNA testing in a case that went all the way to the Massachusetts Supreme Court. However, and it is likely that we may never find out what happened to Melanie on that fateful and tragic night in the woods. Those who choose to brave the wilderness of national parks, mountain ranges, or even seemingly innocuous outdoor trail hikes are frequently at the mercy of nature's whims, even if they do not realize it. Whether simply a surprise rainstorm when you are miles from the trailhead, or becoming lost off the beaten path in unfamiliar wilderness as a freezing darkness begins to fall, we often do not realize how easy it can be to disappear into the wild and never be seen or heard from again. Those who go missing in such conditions and manage to survive to tell the tale should count themselves incredibly lucky, because no one knows what is truly lurking around the bend in the untamed wilds of the earth. But what do you make of these three stories? According to the National UFO Reporting Center, UFO sightings in and around Virginia are up. Over 190 reports were made in 2019, and last year that number is said to have been even higher. Reports range from the standard dish-shaped craft to other shapes such as the triangle and pyramid. One interesting photograph that was recently sent to me was captured above Virginia in 2017. The person said the reason they sent it to me was because they've seen something similar in the sky above Virginia and was wondering if anyone has seen anything similar. The object that was photographed has been described as a large cube, with others saying that it looks like it was taken near a tornado. This could be the case as Virginia is a place that suffers from tornadoes, with the worst times for them being between the months of April and September. Those who saw the images said these strange-looking cubes are not anything new, with others saying they've seen similar things. Not much information can be gathered about the photograph, as when you track down the original poster of the image, a man by the name of Mr. Garcia, he didn't put a caption on the photo. UFO believers who saw it though noted that it looks similar to things that they've seen. The person who sent me the original photograph said the following: "The reason I sent you this image is because it looks very similar to something I've seen. I live close to Woodbridge, and while driving home I've seen on a few occasions a strange-looking object. The only way I can describe this object is that it looks like a large black cube, seems to have the ability to hover in the sky, and doesn't make a sound. I would guess that this thing is well over 100 feet in the air. But every time I've tried to take a photograph, the image just turns out blurry, and you can't really make out what I'm seeing. I have an iPhone 11, but even that can't seem to pick it up. I've seen it twice now, but can't work out what this could be. It doesn't resemble a plane, a helicopter, a blimp, a hot air balloon, or something natural like an animal. It just sits there. Also, I know that this thing isn't a cloud because I can see other clouds hitting this object and then splitting off. So if this was a cloud, it would travel with the others. I've also seen other strange objects within my area. For example, another craft I saw had a ring of 10 lights around it. They would occasionally blink, but not enough for them to be something like a plane. I've talked with friends and neighbors in the region, and they've said they've seen strange things as well." End quote. UFO researchers who study the phenomenon have said that various people have seen these strange cube-like objects, and go on to say that although they're rare, they are sometimes seen, saying that they are different from the most commonly sighted crafts that are witnessed by people. The most commonly sighted UFOs are those of the triangle, cigar, and disc. Another resident who lives in Woodbridge also came forward to detail their sighting, saying that they saw 14 to 24 lights that were flying in a strange formation. They said the following: "They turned and headed north and back to the west and disappeared. They were all illuminated in a white color and made no sound at all. At the point they were turning back west, I could see another craft with green blinking lights coming from the north, higher than the crass and down to where the crass started back to turn west. They all just disappeared. I retired from the Army with 32 years active in reserve, and I've never seen a craft like this with no sound at all. MUFON, or the Mutual UFO Network, is a place where everyday people can go on and submit their report. It's a great place to find interesting UFO sightings, as people can appear anonymous if they like." Another user detailed the mysterious encounter with a triangle-shaped craft. "While driving, me and my wife saw a large triangular-shaped craft. This thing was emitting 3 bright lights, was hovering in the sky without making a sound, appeared to be black in color, and was around 200 feet in length. I did some research when I got home in the hopes of trying to find out what we saw, but I couldn't match it to anything that came up online. This craft looked like a giant black triangle, and we have no idea what it was." End quote. These last few years have been a busy time for the UFO community. In fact, over 3,000 new UFO sightings of extraterrestrial and UFO activity have occurred. And as of right now, thousands of UFO sightings have been reported and cataloged by the MUFON organization. This is an incredible leap in sightings compared to previous years, and has many members of these communities wondering if they could fair well be the case that very soon a dramatic change could come into play and new breakthroughs in the discovery of extraterrestrial life could be made apparent to our world, in the hopes of preparing us for an eventual transparent contact between ourselves and extraterrestrial life. Others have said it's obvious that officials are being more open to the idea of UFOs even going on to say that government officials are gearing up to reveal the truth to the general public. As of right now, various declassified documents have been released, some of which are of particular interest, showing us that officials have had their fair share of run-ins with these unidentified flying objects. Time will tell whether the general public are told the truth about these sightings, but as of right now, we can only speculate about what's going on. So what do you make of these interesting stories? Thousands of mysterious things are reported in our sky every year. The majority of these get explained as things like planes, military flares, wildlife blimps, natural phenomena, and camera anomalies. But every so often something interesting is photographed in our sky, leaving those who see it wondering what was captured. This happened recently in China when a strange object was filmed in the sky a few years back. Residents managed to snap photographs of the strange-looking object while it was hovering above the Shandong province, a place that's known to be a hotspot for UFO sightings. In fact, residents in the area have said this isn't the first time unexplained lights have been seen in the region, going on to say that every time this happens, it doesn't get much coverage in China. Officials quickly came forward to debunk the sighting and said that the most likely explanation was that this was a projection. But as locals said, this doesn't explain away the other UFOs that were reported in the region. One resident said the following: "This isn't the first time that me and my friends have seen odd lights. Whenever these strange lights have seen people, try their hardest to capture them on camera. Because without this evidence, no one will believe us." Another thing I've noticed is that the media will normally only feature sightings that can be easily explained. Many of the hard-to-explain UFO photographs don't reach the media. You can only normally find them on UFO groups. Me and my friends have seen large crafts hovering the sky that we estimate are a few hundred feet in length. Other times we've seen large orbs a few feet in diameter flying around the city. These are the ones that residents are talking about when we say we're seeing UFOs. It's hard to explain what they are because they're moving so fast. They are definitely not things like drones. They're too small and too fast." End quote. There's some who have said there's a theme with many of these sightings, with skeptics saying the majority of these images are blurry and that you can't make out what the object is. One person said the following: "I don't think these lights are anything. Probably something like a drone or a Chinese lantern." End quote. Others, though, hit back at these explanations and say it's just a lazy reply, with them saying that if someone says it's a drone or a lantern, it means they don't want to conduct any real research to explain what it is. When UFOs are reported in China, however, it doesn't have as much of an impact. It's usually debunked straight away and people seem to forget about it. A large amount of these crafts have been photographed from this region, and it seems that it's only when they reach social media that they start to have an impact, with people then asking what they are and where they came from. This is what happened back in 2018, when many residents noticed what appeared to be strange glowing lights in the sky above Beijing. Multiple residents saw these crafts and started to snap photographs. One eyewitness described the lights as looking like a cone, and that every so often it would give off bright colors. Others said the lights would suddenly appear in the sky before mysteriously vanishing. Even though this strange event was witnessed by many people in the region, an explanation was not given for what was seen that night. One researcher, Yu Geng, reported that the object was high in the sky at the time it was seen, and that it definitely wasn't a satellite or any man-made object. It's important to note as well that there was no rocket launches in the area of the time of the report, leaving some to suggest that the only explanation that can be given is that it was in fact a genuine unidentified flying object. As of today, Chinese state media has given no official explanations about the strange-looking objects. It's also interesting to note that the area in which the object was seen is highly restricted airspace, so it's unlikely to have been a man-made craft. Others have suggested that the object in question could have been the military testing out some new tech. But as some have pointed out, it's unlikely they would have done this over such a crowded place. Interestingly, similar-looking objects have been seen in various countries across the world, causing some to put forward the idea that these objects don't belong to us. UFO researchers who live in China also say that a lot of what is seen is censored and doesn't end up reaching the masses, saying that there's a lot of UFO sightings that the general public doesn't know about. Non-believers have said the cause of the lights could be down to atmospheric conditions, suggesting that it could be similar to ball lightning or earthquake lights. Another idea was that it could have been a resident using something like a drone. However, this doesn't explain how the lights vanished and then reappeared again. As of today, what was seen that night remains a mystery. Interestingly, residents in China have said it's not just UFOs that are seen in the sky, but every so often large structures appear to be floating motionless above them, causing some to say that they look like buildings and could be part of a secret government project. Once again, these claims are debunked by researchers and government officials, who say that the most likely answer for what people are seeing is that of Fata Morgana. It's a common atmospheric illusion that causes images far from the distance to appear as if they're floating in the sky high above the horizon. The optical illusion occurs when layers of warm and cold air create an atmospheric duct that acts similar to that of a refracting lens, creating an almost mirrored image of the object past the horizon and making it appear as if it's floating amongst the clouds. Such illusions have allowed people to see images of cities far past the curve of the horizon, made it appear as if boats were sailing through the air, or as if cities themselves were built in the sky. Though this phenomenon has become somewhat of an explained natural illusion, such sightings never fail to baffle those witnessing it. So what do you make of these interesting photographs? And what do you think the harder to explain photographs don't make it into the news? Anonymous are a group of hackers and online activists that have been featured in the mainstream media. Not only are their discoveries interesting, but no one really knows who they are. One of the first founders of the organization went on Reddit and did an interview. One of the questions that was asked was who is Anonymous and what's their goal, to which they responded with the following. Anonymous has all walks of life. The most infamous is obviously the hacker type, but just as important are the ones that mobilize online and spread awareness. Do research and collaborate in that manner. If you have a voice, you can help Anonymous. When asked what future members of Anonymous will be tackling, he said the following: privacy rights, big data, monolithic megacorporations owning everything about your life. End quote. This response received the most upvotes and created an interesting discussion around billionaires. How much wealth one person should own, along with other interesting talking points. It's important to note that pretty much anyone can claim they're part of Anonymous. Recently, several members of the group came forward and said that the U.S. Space Agency, NASA, is getting ready to release information on alien life. The group posted the following. NASA says aliens are coming. The group has said it's come to this conclusion based on how the conversation has changed on the alien topic, saying that people like astronauts are more openly talking about them and that the government are saying that they've had encounters with these beings, saying that over the last 100 years mysterious crafts have made contact with our planet and these are unlike anything that we've ever built. Not only this, but the group also point out the UFO sightings and amateur researchers have played a big part in this, saying that these everyday people have managed to create a talking point that's now been taken seriously. Although the group made these claims a while back, something to note is that not long after these claims an incredible announcement was made by Eric Davis. According to Eric Davis, the astrophysicist claims that the United States Department of Defense is in possession of recovered off-road craft that is verifiably not made on our planet. His story that was detailed to the New York Times claims that Davis was tasked with giving classified briefings to Defense Department agencies, the Senate Armed Services Committee and the Senate Intelligence Committee last October. During multiple instances of recovered materials from extraterrestrial events, Davis details that he was unable to determine the source of the materials that made up the recovered artifacts, most likely being off-world metals or materials that could not have been terrestrial in nature. Interestingly, following the supposed claims of briefings to the Senate Intelligence Committee, the Intelligence Authorization Act was passed by the Senate, which orders the program to report at least a fraction of its findings to the general public within 180 days after the passing of the act. This could very well mean that within the next few months, eventual disclosure of the project and the advanced recovered extraterrestrial materials will be slowly released to the general public. Although skeptics have been quick to claim that Eric W. Davis is nothing more than a fraud making outrageous claims. Key figures have also come forward to back up the claims of Davis, including the former director of the Pentagon's Advanced Error Identification Threat Program, Luis Elizondo. Additionally, in regards to the program and its ties to the passing of the Intelligence Authorization Act, former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid commented that he'd been involved in the effort and hopes that the UFO investigation program will seek further evidence of other potential recoveries of extraterrestrial graphs. Even the acting chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, Marco Rubio, provided an official statement in which he says the following, but maybe there is a completely sort of boring explanation for it, but we need to find out, expressing concern that the increased reports of unidentified crafts over American military bases is definitely seen as a threat, not only to the national security of the United States but also the general public. Although Marco Rubio believes the sightings could be attributed to a possible technological leap made by China or Russia, Eric Davis and Luis Elizondo are far more certain of the craft originating from an off-world source. Across several interviews from mass media news outlets, Luis Elizondo claims that not only did these crafts exhibit behaviors that appear to defy the very laws of aviation, but that these crafts were found to be 100% not man-made and were out of the scope of human capabilities. His reasoning for this claim was that the crafts investigated demonstrated hypersonic capabilities. That is described as being far beyond the scope that is physically tolerable by a human being, of whom would experience a high amount of Gs to the point that it would either be fatal or seriously wound them. This meant that whoever or whatever was piloting these aircrafts appeared to be non-human. Not only this, but the technological developments of these crafts also made it very apparent that the creation of these unidentified flying objects were vastly superior to anything man-made. Luis Elizondo describes in one of his many reports regarding the subject matter as the following: there is a lot we really don't know. We have identified anomalous craft that does not have the obvious flight surfaces, forms of propulsion and maneuvering in ways that include extreme maneuverability beyond the healthy G-forces of anything biological. These aircraft, will call them aircraft's display capabilities, not in the U.S. arsenal or any other military is. So what do you make of these recent claims? And do you think we will be told the truth about these mysterious crowds? And also alien life? Jesus is arguably one of the most recognized figures of all time. Many have said that Jesus is one of the most interesting yet mysterious people to have walked our planet, yet various people have detailed encountering him, going on to say that he's appeared to them in times of need. Not everyone who encountered him, though, was expecting to. Miss Galvez was hiking up Hancock Hill when they encountered something strange on the way down. She said the following: we hiked Hancock Hill today, and on our way down, I turned around and saw what looked like a white figure on the next hill. Anyone know what I'm looking at? End quote. The comments section was filled with people saying that she had actually encountered Jesus and that she's not the only one who's seen the mysterious apparition in the area, with others going on to share their encounters with the figure. One woman said the following: I can't believe that I found this image. It was only a few weeks back when me and my husband were hiking the same trail and encountered something similar. We are currently going through a rough patch and I've been doing a lot of praying. When I saw the figure, it almost brought me to tears. The encounter instantly made me feel better. With another person saying the following: this is definitely Christ. Since I was young, I've had many visions where he's come to me and helped me in times of need. This was a special encounter. End quote. With this user saying the following: I once saw a mysterious figure while hiking here, but I never thought that it could have been Jesus. It was white in color and seemed to be giving off beams of light. Another idea that someone else had who I told the encounter to was that it could have been the Martha light. Strange lights have been seen hovering and moving around this region for at least 100 years, so it could have been that. With that being said, though, I don't think anyone has reported that they've been in the shape of a human. End quote. Not everyone was convinced by these theories, though, with one person saying that there is actually a cutout of Jesus on the trail, and that sometimes people prop it up in order to fool hikers that don't know the area very well. Although this could explain some of the sightings, it doesn't explain the events where people have said they've seen the figure moving around on the mountain, only for it to vanish when they tried to get closer. In recent years, Many people have come forward and said they've had a divine encounter. Whether this was an interaction with a loved one or even Jesus himself, many people believe it can happen. Those who've made these claims have said it's changed the world for the better. Science tells us that these visions are usually caused by dreams. The brain is very complex and we still can't answer how exactly it works. But visions of gods are believed to be just thoughts. Bad Rapier has caused a lot of controversy among believers of the Catholic faith. He's come forward in recent years and said that Christ has made contact with him. And not only that, but said that bad things are going to happen. He claimed that he spoke directly to Jesus, who told them that the end of the world was near, and that it would be brought about by natural disasters and spurred by God's desperation at humanity's destruction of the planet. Padre Pio claimed that Jesus told him that humanity has abandoned the right path and taken those which could only reach a destination of violence and catastrophe. He said the following: "When the world was entrusted to man, it was a garden. Man has turned it into an atmosphere full of poisons. Nothing now serves to purify the house of a man. A deep work is necessary, which can only come from heaven." Many who have read into this have said it seems to be taking a dig at how the modern world has panned out, suggesting that humans have damaged our planet and that things need to be done to correct this. Jesus allegedly told him that he is no longer able to extend divine advice to the people of the world, and instead they must face whatever comes next. The priests claim that Jesus said the following: "Prepare to live 3 days in total darkness. These 3 days are very close, and in these 3 days they will remain dead without eating or drinking. Then the light will return, but many will be the men who will not see it anymore. Many people will escape scared. It will run without a goal. They will say that there is salvation to the east, and people will run to the east, but it will fall on a cliff. They will say that to the west there is salvation, and people will run to the west, but they will fall into a furnace. The earth will tremble and the panic will be great. The earth is sick. The earthquake will be like a snake. They will feel it crawling everywhere, and many stones will fall and many men will perish. You are like ants, because the time will come when men will take their eyes off for a crumb of bread. Businesses will be looted. Warehouses will be taken and assaulted and destroyed. Or will be the one who in those dark days will be without a candle, without a jug of water, without necessary for 3 mums." End quote. However, others disagree with this, with one person saying the following: "This is typical religious fear-mongering. If you don't do this, then this will happen. It's blackmail at a global scale. I have no problem with people believing in religion, but when you say that bad things will happen if you don't believe in it, I'll get annoyed." End quote. Although these types of statements cause some to disagree, there are others that believe this does happen. Another person had this to say: "I believe that Christ does show himself to some people. He does this mostly to offer advice and wisdom. When I'm feeling down, I can feel his presence strongly, and this makes me feel much better. It's great knowing that there is someone there for you." End quote. So what do you make of this photograph? And have any of you had a divine encounter?